What is up, guys? Delboy here. A quick run through of the cards that went down last night in America. There were 3 cards. There was a PBC card, a top rank card, and a Golden Boy card. And I've got to say, I wasn't really looking forward to any of these cards in particular, but the Golden Boy card and the PBC card were actually quite good. I enjoyed those cards. We will start with the Golden Boy DAZN card, headlined by Rey Vargas versus Tomoki Kameda. Rey Vargas was making the 5th defence of his WBC Super Bantamweight title, and he beat Tomoki Kameda by a unanimous decision. Rey Vargas done a good job of keeping this fight on the outside. He was peppering Tomoki Kameda with his jab and long right hand, and he neutralised Kameda up close by clinching and holding. Kameda did have success here and there. You know, he was catching Vargas with good single shots, and he did do some good work on the inside. But ultimately, I think despite Kameda's effort, the work he was doing was too few and far in between, whereas Vargas was quite consistent with his jab and long-range boxing. The problem for Kameda was the fact that he could never really get close to Rey Vargas for any length of time before he was clinched up and held, you know. So Kameda, good effort, but not quite enough. Rey Vargas boxed a technically decent fight, I guess. He was effective in neutralising Tomoki Kameda. Where does Rey Vargas go from here? I believe Guillermo Rigondeaux is his mandatory challenger. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight, actually. I think that would be a very good fight at this stage. And as for Kameda, listen, I don't think he beats any of the champions in that division, but he's entertaining and he could be involved in good fights if you match him with more aggressive fighters. So he can definitely be involved in some fun fights. But yeah, Vargas versus Kameda, it was okay, but fairly comprehensive by Rey Vargas. And there were a couple of good things on the undercard as well. Firstly, Diego De La Hoya, he got upset by Ronnie Rios. He got stopped by a right uppercut in the 6th round in what was a really good fight. Both guys were trading. De La Hoya was letting his hands go, as was Ronnie Rios, and both guys were taking lumps out of each other. It really was a back and forth fight until round 5. Round 5 itself was back and forth, but you know, Ronnie Rios was landing the telling punches. He was exchanging with Diego De La Hoya, and his left hook couldn't miss. He was catching De La Hoya every time he threw it, and De La Hoya's face was bloodied up at this stage, and he was buzzed by a couple of left hooks in round 5. And round 5 to me looked like the beginning of the end. It looked like Diego De La Hoya's final stand in that fight. And round 6, Diego De La Hoya is caught coming in with a lovely right uppercut by Ronnie Rios, and you know, it drops him to his knees. De La Hoya beats the count, but he says to the referee he can't continue, so the referee waves it off. Ronnie Rios gets a really good win, and he puts himself back amongst the contenders at Super Bantamweight. Good win by Ronnie Rios in a really good fight, had some great exchanges, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And another even more shocking upset on this card took place when highly touted prospect Eduardo Hernandez got knocked out in 1 round by Roger Gutierrez. This fight took place at Super Featherweight, and I was shocked by this result. I've seen quite a bit of Eduardo Hernandez, and I really rated him, to be quite honest. I felt he was one of the best talents coming out of Mexico, but he got chin-checked and he got knocked out. You know, he was fighting a guy called Roger Gutierrez, a tall, rangy guy with good power, and Gutierrez did a good job of keeping Hernandez at the end of his punches. He was throwing long jabs and long right hands, and he was catching Hernandez right at the end of his shots, and he was countering very effectively as Hernandez was coming forwards. Hernandez had some success coming forwards. You know, he got some good shots in, but the telling power shots were coming from Roger Gutierrez, and he knocked Eduardo Hernandez out towards the end of the 1st round with a lovely right hand. Eduardo Hernandez, he tried to beat the count, but basically he did his best Trevor Burbick impression, legs all over the place. He fell over. He was in no condition to continue. So great win by Roger Gutierrez, and he really does introduce himself to the super featherweight division. He himself is only 24 years old, so, this guy could be a bit of a player. I know he suffered early defeats in his career to the likes of Rene Alvarado, but he's rebounded with a big win here. Maybe he can do something in the super featherweight division. We will see. But ultimately, I actually really enjoyed that Golden Boy DAZN card. It wasn't high profile, but the fights I saw, I really enjoyed. So credit to Golden Boy and DAZN for putting on that card. There was also another card by the PBC, and this was headlined by Jamal James versus Antonio DeMarco. Now, on paper, that is a fairly nondescript main event. However, the fight itself was a great war, a back and forth bout. Both guys had success. Both guys were, really in there to get the win, and both guys had great moments. It was a back and forth fight, ebbs and flows, and I thoroughly enjoyed the action. The only criticism I had of this fight was the fact it was only a 10-rounder. This should have been a 12-rounder because it was a great fight, and, I would have loved to have seen 2 more rounds of action. Great fight. I felt Jamal James just about nicked it. I think the decision was okay. But, if you've not seen that fight, find a copy online and watch it. And also on this card, you had Robert Helenius versus Gerald Washington, a crossroads fight between 2 fringe-level heavyweight contenders. And again, this fight was quite good. Both guys had success. Both guys had their moments. At times, Washington was in control, and at others, Helenius was in control. But Gerald Washington won the fight by an 8th-round knockout. He hurt Helenius with a nice right hand, and he then finished him with a lovely chopping right hand to the head. And like I mentioned, this fight had back and forths, and when Helenius got knocked out, it appeared he actually took control of the fight. So he got knocked out in round 8, but in rounds 6 and 7, Helenius was boxing quite well, and it appeared that Gerald Washington was gassing, but he pulled the knockout out in round 8. Really good knockout as well. If you've not seen the fight, watch the fight, but if you don't intend to, at least watch the knockout. Really good finish by Gerald Washington. Now hopefully Washington goes on to fight Charles Martin. That's what I would like to see from Gerald Washington. And speaking of your boy Charles Martin, he was on the undercard and he knocked out journeyman Daniel Marst by a 4th round body shot. So I would like to see Washington versus Martin sometime soon. I think that would be a good fight. And other than that, there were a few prospects on the card. Guys like Gary Antonio Russell, Carlos Balderas, Gary Antoine Russell. There's a few prospects and they all picked up wins. And last but not least, we go to the card promoted by Top Rank. Shakur Stevenson made short work of Alberto Guevara. As we all expected, Shakur Stevenson won by a 3rd round knockout. Dropped Guevara several times. I believe he dropped him 3 times. And he stopped him. Routine, dominant and impressive by Shakur Stevenson. But it's got to be said, Guevara was a late replacement, and he really wasn't good enough to be in there with Shakur Stevenson. So Shakur Stevenson just did what he had to do, and he was impressive doing it. And lastly, on that card, you also had Joshua Greer Jr. He fought Nikolai Potapov, and Greer won the fight on points. Apparently this was a robbery. I've got to confess, this is the only fight that I'm talking about that I've not seen. But apparently that fight was a robbery. So I need to find a copy of that fight and have a look at it myself. But I heard it was a robbery. In fact, I saw Tim Bradley and Andre Ward say it was a robbery. So there you go. The Top Rank card was definitely the weakest, whereas the PBC card and the DAZN card were actually quite entertaining, to be quite honest. So there we go. They are my quick thoughts on the weekend's action out in America. Share your thoughts below. Peace.